Go you! It is me, Destiny Brandt, founder of It's Destiny Sales Recruiting, and hopefully your recruiter. I wanted to make a video today about putting your best foot forward before, during, and after interviews. A lot of people, surprisingly, even some of the best salespeople, talk about being ghosted, left on red, or having a hard time even warranting the first interview in the recruiting lifecycle. My advice is try to template as many things out as possible and have an intentional follow-up game. Obviously, no one wants to get an email saying, "Hey, I'm following up. Hey, I'm checking in. Hey, can we do another call?" That's incredibly self-serving. So whether you are trying to get an interview for the very first time or whether you are trying to move forward in the recruiting life cycle, make sure all of your follow-ups are intentional, of value, and when you can try to teach them something. A lot of the people that you're going to be engaging with in the recruiting life cycle, they need things to be able to build a case on your behalf, not only to warrant the first call, but to move you on to their next scheduled peer call or ultimately end up hiring you. And so how your follow-up game can continue to give them value beyond the short windows of time on a call can really make an impact on staying credible, continuing to bring value, and ultimately what that base salary offer is. Now, that sounds like a lot of work. It's 2025, right? Times are tough. Getting to quota has never been harder. So, especially if you are a performer or just someone who is in survival mode, this idea that you're going to have to do all of these extra things seems like an absolute nightmare. But I always say the people who get a job and the people who don't get a job, or the people who get hired at an X range versus the people who are hired at a much higher range, have the privilege of spending time on admin work to get your scripts right, to get your templates right, to get your frameworks right. So as needed, you can copy paste, and build a pipeline that'll serve you for the rest of your career. If you do not have someone's email, I recommend, or at least at this point in 2025, recommend using a tool like Apollo. I do believe that you need to have a business email to be able to scrape email contacts and phone numbers, but I believe, hopefully by the time that this video is still up, that they offer not only free contacts with that email, but then also up to 2 free sequences if you actually genuinely want to automate that. I tell most people no need to get bottled in writing a sequence, especially if you've never done it for the first time via Apollo, but instead use a tool where you can scrape the email or use the emails that you have on file because you've engaged with these companies, and then think in templates. So what are things that you can highlight and include in any sort of manual or automated follow-up to put your best foot forward again before, during, and after interviews? So the first thing is reminding people that there is no shame in the redundance game. It seems pretty annoying to essentially go and highlight things that are already on your resume, especially if you assume someone's already seen your resume or your LinkedIn, but do not have an ego. There are lots of companies that may miss a line item on your resume or not even scroll down to your recommendation. So the first few touches or whenever you want to include this could just be dissecting parts of your resume. Hey, here is the screenshot of my biggest impact of how I generated revenue in this last role, or how I designed or implemented or co-developed something. It can also add a lot of value to kind of utilize a yearbook where you may not have a testimonial from an executive or a peer. And in that case, I do encourage you to try to build those out, but you can include screenshots. Here's a Slack message from my boss. Here's a screenshot from an email from my client saying that I'm one of the best account executives that they've ever worked with. So the first few touches, as you'll see in our sequence section of this website, is just kind of reiterating a lot of the things that you would hope they would have seen. It's a big ask to ask someone to open up a resume or a LinkedIn, especially if you're doing 100% cold outreach. I personally, with my own sales process, and what I encourage a majority of my candidates to do, is sell from the C-level down. So in your first email, let's say this is a brand new prospect company, sell to the VP, the CRO, the founder, the VP of sales, and then any champion that makes sense will essentially go to the people side, spell chief, spell it wrong. Sometimes people have that spelled wrong. Type in VP, head of, add all the right necessary personas, start an email chain. I also think that there is no ego needed when you are doing, follow-up in order to kind of warrant that trust. So if you have the time and availability, treat the recruiting life cycle exactly how you would the sales cycle, and don't rely on just an email that who knows with delivery rates, especially with sending screenshots of anything. So, call them if you can, pull their number on Apollo, call them, leave them a voicemail, send them a voice note or something of value in the DMs, and then address, hey, I contacted you guys via, phone and DMs. I wanted to, like a good salesperson, get us all together via email. So don't just rely on one channel, hit up multiple channels. If this is a company that you're really excited about, go and engage with their product, their engineering, their executive team, go and add other AEs, other peers, see if there's things of value that you can teach them by giving them a podcast, a book, some content from another content creator, something specific to this buyer, this industry, like a drip campaign, Talix, Matrix. But essentially you want to, for companies that you're really excited about, really immerse yourself in the org and the culture. Granted, I speak from a very go-to-market lens where a lot of my companies are more than happy to kind of see you emulate the sales cycle in the recruiting life cycle. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I would say as a general rule of thumb for earlier stage startups, even up to Series F, that if someone doesn't like you selling to them, then the writings are, on the wall versus, larger corporations like the major four obviously have very rigid rules on how you get referrals and how you engage with a company. So this is specifically for SMB, go-to-market, and mid-market companies. But honestly, a lot of my billion-dollar private equity orgs really appreciate someone multi-threading, relying on champions and decision makers, and asking for the meeting in an email, because no great deal that you ever closed began and ended in a DM. Other things that you can include in a follow-up is getting more specific to them and their buyer, as I had illustrated. We have on our website tons and tons and tons of things that you can do to showcase your skills, whether that's generic templates that you can save forever on a Google Doc of how you follow up or how you engage with companies, or ones that are specific to them. I encourage people, if you're building out specific to a certain industry or buyer or stage of company, if you're a niche candidate, meaning you're only talking to MarTech companies or you're only talking to AWS cloud spend companies, it could be a value to give the specific to a company project to another company in that industry, where you can essentially say in that message, hey, I actually built this for another company that I'm currently having conversations with. But if it warrants the first call, the next call, I'm more than happy to include that. Other kind of more specific / generic things that you can include in these emails or these follow-up messages are things that you ask in general, right? So what are your best discovery questions? How do you kind of ask that? Vendor or company agnostic? What about how you kind of run a needs analysis? Are you using Kyle Assay's kind of framework of understanding what they're doing now versus where they're trying to go? And so you can position your offering. What about this specific buyer or stage of company is different? What additional discovery questions would you ask, or specific questions would you ask that buyer or that champion? So essentially, like, break in your whole sales cycle, all of your receipts, dissect that, only add things that are specific to them when necessary. If you make something specific to one buyer, if you are having conversations with companies that are very similar, send those to them as a way to warrant those next interview. Other things that you can do to kind of keep the conversation going is looping in your champions or people that you've met in the recruiting lifecycle and showing them why they should vouch for you in the next step. And one of the things that I'll have people do is go out and prepare, put on your, okay, I'm already going to this next step in the interview, even though this person left me on red, and go and prepare. What kind of questions would you ask that person? What kind of stories would you bring? What kind of examples would you bring? What sort of proof would you bring? And then you can loop that into the last person that you engaged with and say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking in this next step, so that you can see how I'm going to, influence or build value with this next person. Does this warrant trust? And I would say, if you haven't heard back from that person within a 2-3 day period, send that to the next person, which is why doing a good discovery in your every single interview is important, and making sure that you're getting intel on who you're speaking to next. So if there's any periods of lull or silence, you are already kind of giving an idea of what does this person like to talk to, what experiences or stories are necessary. So being proactive in both looping in your champion or the last person you talk to, or kind of going ahead and engaging with that next person in the life cycle, just seems a little less scary, because you already have some intentionality, because you've picked the brain of the last person that you talked to. Or you can just go under more of an assumptive state where you're really showing them that you understand that persona, that person's position in the recruiting lifecycle. I think that two kind of big issues or like worries people have when it comes to this is doing too much specific work with companies that end up going nowhere. We talked about how templates and how, that kind of hopefully alleviates some sort of concern that you would ultimately end up having. Another kind of concern is, am I looking too desperate? And I have a video somewhere here on what does desperate mean. If you as a human, person to person here, were to talk about what desperate means, that usually means low level, not intentional, very self-serving. Hey, when can we meet? Hey, can we pick up another call? Desperation is not intentionality. It's not giving. Capitalism or getting a job is about two things. Mostly getting a job is about two things: building trust, showing someone that you have the requirements for the role, and that's dissecting a lot of things that we talked about and giving them social proof or examples or specific frameworks of how you're going to do that, and then making people like you. A lot of these companies, especially earlier stage startups, are trying to vet who is in this the most, who cares the most. And you can definitely manufacture caring the most if you just open up a Google Doc and you start thinking, what is your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth things that you would say to engage or re-engage with a company. And continue to build off of that as you get more experience, as you have more interviews. Let's say, for example, you are noticing that you're getting passed on in third and fourth technical interviews and these questions are coming up, or they're asking these specific behavioral questions. Pay attention to the data. What are people asking you? Where do you think there's gaps? And then build out proactive stories, examples, recommendations to alleviate that, and then include that in your Google Doc of how you're going to engage with people in the future. If you were to look at your pipeline now, just make a list of all the companies that you've talked to before in the past. And maybe they passed on you, maybe they ghosted on you. First step could be just engaging with them again, but giving them something of value. So a lot of people treat every interview like the first interview. They'll do a bunch of specific research, build a bunch of specific things, and then they kind of just stay in the Google Doc forever, unable to see the light again. So I really challenge people to go through all the companies that they've talked to re-engage with them, to look through all of their preparations and notes and ask themselves, is this something that could be templated or add to my kind of warm sequence? Other things that I kind of tell people to do is be intentional. If you're talking to one company, engage with their biggest competitor. You can create jobs for yourself, and this is how people do it, by asking them, are you forecasting any headcount? Here's some examples, here's when I'm wanting to make a move, and then every few days engage with the right personas until eventually they say, yes, Destiny, we are hiring. It's not till Q3, and then you can manage your expectations or how you bring value between those periods of lulls. A lot of like larger companies like Gong or Outreach, they typically have conversations with candidates a quarter ahead of time that they're actually going to be hiring. So finding a way to develop or maintain relationships with your champions and your decision makers before, during, and after can be absolutely critical with landing your dream job, when a lot of people are very reactive in the way that they engage versus proactive. And again, these are things that you can do if you just have the privilege of admin time to think about what is your standard process going to be, and then always adding to that, especially as you start a new job, make sure that you're taking as many screenshots as possible, getting as many recommendations, testimonials, always be planning for the next thing. If no one's told you today, you're doing an amazing job. I'm so beyond proud of you. Getting a job is hard. Being in sales is hard. Being in startups is definitely hard, but you're more than enough. You got this. Cheers to you. Let's make money. Go you.